Remembering Mac Miller. The second half of 2018 was a time where death was at the forefront of my mind a lot of the time. And I know that might sound quite dark, but I believe it can be sometimes healthy to have a good old think about death and what it means to you. These thoughts came about mostly due to one event in particular, and that was the death of Mac Miller. His passing profoundly affected me, and I want to use this video to do two things. I want to explain why it affected me, but more importantly, I want to explain about what, in my eyes, made Mac Miller a great artist, and some of the things I've taken away from his music and his actions during his life. There's no way I can do him justice, but I hope I can communicate just a little bit of the impact and impression he left on me. And if we imagine he had that impact upon millions across the world, we can really appreciate what a force for good this guy from Pittsburgh was. So what made Mac Miller a great artist? I think overall, it was his love and respect for the genre he worked in. Mac was a multi-instrumentalist. He produced much of his own music, and when he wasn't creating Mac Miller albums, he was consistently creating under a range of pseudonyms. Larry Fisherman, Larry Lovestein, and Delusional Thomas were some of the more notable ones. I'd hazard a guess that there's likely some others hanging around on some corners of the internet that haven't been discovered yet, but this passion to create hip-hop in many forms and not try to use this established brand as Mac Miller was a real display of the sort of passion he had for just making music. And he didn't just make music, he made a lot of it. Mac really has a great work ethic, which I believe is essential to both his growth as an artist and also his success in an industry where ultimately he began as an outsider. This links into my second point, the way in which he carried himself. In his death, Mac provoked a gigantic response on social media, and I noticed something during this time. In the immeasurable amount of tweets, posts from fellow celebrities, fans and collaborators alike, nobody had a bad word to say about Mac Miller, and those who shared their experiences with him, more often than not, spoke about one specific thing. He always approached them first. From fellow artists saying how he reached out to just show appreciation, or in some cases opportunities to help them in their career, to the fans who he interacted with. Mac was a humble soul, and he wasn't afraid of reaching out to others. But how did this make him a great artist? Well, just look at his catalogue. Art is at its most fun and exciting when it's collaborative, and Mac certainly made the most of collaborating with as many artists as he could. It was often joked that if there was an award for most improved rapper, it would go to Mac Miller. He started out his career with a very limited range. He catered very much to that high school, university demographic, and he did it very well. Some of his most successful songs to this day come from that era, but it's his post-Macadelic work that stands out amongst critics. Mac saw the lane he needed to take after Blue Sky Park, and he invested himself fully in it. The projects that came from this time were diverse, experimental, and oftentimes very raw. The tragic part about the post-Macadelic path he chose to go with his music was that it can be very easily mapped to his drug use. The more he experimented with substances, the more introspective and experimental the music got, with probably the pinnacle of his drug use matching up with the release of the mixtape Faces.
Finally, I don't even need my fucking eyes to see. Come and die with me, cause everybody got dead homies.
Beyond Faces, we saw Mac display an uncanny self-awareness, another of his many valuable traits. If we listen to the track Godspeed, we can hear Mac's candidness about his drug problem. You can hear the raw honesty in that track. As we saw Mac seemingly more awake and present throughout the past few years, it felt as though, as fans, we were going to get the conclusion to the Mac Miller story with a nice happily ever after. He'd been through hell and back, and now he was on the path to health. But life doesn't always work like that, unfortunately. And now all we can do is study what he left behind and hope to learn from Mac Miller, from both his greatness and his mistakes. And I believe that's why his death affected me so much. I was one of those fans who truly believed he was on the road to recovery. I watched that Zane Lowe interview, and I was blinded with happiness to hear that he'd seemingly reached some kind of peace with his demons, whilst arguably reaching new levels within his career. So his death came at an immense shock, and a reminder that no matter what, life isn't promised. And in a strange way, over the past couple of months, that's been motivating me. Mac Miller showed in life that the values of self-awareness, dedication, kindness, a strong work ethic, and many other traits can take a person a long way in both artistry and life. And his death showed that today is the day to start emulating those things. Because your life can be taken away at any moment, and we should all strive to leave behind a legacy as close to that of Mac Miller's as we possibly can. I want to thank you for watching this video. This has been something that's been on my mind for a while now. Believe it or not, I actually started writing a rough draft of this about 2 weeks after he died, but I decided to sort of sit with my feelings and see how they progressed over time. I hope you've taken away something useful from this, and if you do anything today, please go listen to some Mac Miller. I've listed some of my favourite tracks on the screen right now as some sort of inspiration. Once again, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.